Hi there. I thought I'd take you through next episode, which is playing games to learn, but with technology. So I'm just going to unpack it a little bit around the theory of gamification and game-based learning. And something that kind of inspires me is the work of Prensky. Now, Mark Prensky is pretty much famous for the concept of digital native or digital immigrant, and you can read about that through lots of different resources he's created. But something that kind of stands out from some of his work is this quote that children's brains are changing to accommodate the new technologies with which they spend so much time. And it is this growing, area that as teachers, we are exposed to different technologies and how we use them with children. And so something that kind of reiterates that is a question that's raised is how do you enhance learning of students by playing games with technologies, and what actually is available for a teacher to integrate into their teaching practice. So I'm going to unpack that just a little bit. And we're going to kind of summarize, I guess, these areas of being prepared. It is to be prepared to create and learn on the go. And this is just a very game-based orientated approach to learning. So using available technologies is great. Having time to practice before you use them in your teaching is really important, and that's essential if it's a brand new tool, but also that you need to plan before you create, and that makes what you create a little bit more targeted and a little bit more efficient. And then it also has to have the ability to be shared digitally, so that's really a concern. And these are just 4 key things to remember. Now, a goal that I like to target, I guess, particularly when we're planning to use new technologies to help gamify a situation, is that there should be at least one goal you have for using games in your teaching. Otherwise, you may not be using them appropriately, and that's really quite important. So try and consider what the one goal, the main goal is for you to adopt technologies to help gamify the learning. So some of the language that we use around game-based learning, gamification, digital gaming, there's a whole area of literature that unpacks these areas. But when we talk about gamification, it's a little bit more broader, particularly when we're talking about it in educational design sense. It is about the use of game design elements in a non-game context. And that's really quite clear. So education is a non-game context. So by making the decision to use games in an educational context, we are gamifying. So the literature is really quite clear that there are very mixed results about how we explore different approaches in education, but also what the opportunities still are, where we can still experiment within our teaching practice. So the decision to gamify any learning activity is basically around the potential that it has to enhance learners. And there's keywords that pop up throughout the literature. Motivation and engagement are very key, and that is probably where the majority of the readings I've found kind of target. But of course, we're also enhancing the learners by encouraging them. We're helping prepare them for something. We're helping to retain them as well, particularly in a higher educational sense. We're also given the opportunity to assess and track their progress, but we're also providing opportunities to interact, so learning becomes more interactive rather than passive. So these are just some of the reasons why we would gamify. But what that means in a gaming sense, and by trying to gamify education, is some of the common features of gamification. Now, when I talk about leaderboards or scoreboards, levels, points, badges, and progress bars, they are the core features that we see being applied from games to game-based learning. So there's built around strategies for each of those approaches. But some of the language that we start to see emerge is also around the word challenge, a quest, having achievements. there's a story or a hunt going on. These are other kind of features that are very useful in gamifying our learning. Okay, some of the definitions that are starting to more come to light are around digital game-based learning. And now we're talking very explicitly around the use of digital games to promote learning. And it's a concept that's certainly been around a while, but the literature seems to be increasing around this digital component. And Prensky, even in 2003, stated that video games are not the enemy, but the best opportunity we have to engage our kids in real learning. Now, we could unpack that and be critical of that point of view, but we're just trying to keep an open mind, I guess, at this point, that there is opportunities in using games in a classroom sense. So some of the examples I have in my toolbox that I turn to if I have the need are gamifying approaches or gaming tools, okay? So how do educators use gamification to potentially enhance the learning opportunities? Okay, these three tools, Minecraft is come a very long way since it was first created. There is an educational version of it that can be used and integrated. It is something that takes an awful lot of energy to adapt to and use appropriately in the classroom. Two other tools that I actually use definitely more often than Minecraft would be Kahoot or Poll Everywhere. Now, these are very similar tools and they do enable interaction in real time, and that's really quite key. However, they can also be created and placed in an asynchronous kind of environment. So I think that's really shows you the opportunities by enhancing in the moment in a real sense, in a real classroom is really great. You can play games to quiz and poll your learners, but you can also have them available for when they're finished. So that's really quite important. So the tip for today is about how you build your game toolbox, okay? And by having at least two types of gaming approaches in your toolbox, you're going to be able to integrate these appropriately when the opportunity arises. So that could be digital games and some kind of quizzing tool. And I guess that's the opportunity here is your preference and how much time you're going to invest in integrating games into your teaching. So thank you and stay safe.